So, what should we make of video games that try to reflect terrorism and counterterrorism? Came across an interesting announcement recently about the release of a new game called 6 Days in Fallujah. It apparently is a game, it's a first, I guess it's a shooter game, one that I don't know a lot about. I don't do games online. But it talks about the battle to retake Fallujah from Islamic State. And apparently the game has been in development was developed 10 years ago. And for reasons of which I'm unaware, the decision was made not to launch the game, not to make it available. And yet here we are 10 years later, and the game apparently is out. I watched a short video about the game, and a couple things I think bear commenting. First and foremost, and I know nothing about game development, it looks like the developers reached out to primarily US, I imagine, servicemen and women who took part in the American Army's effort to take the Iraqi city of Fallujah back from Islamic State. Therefore, the, encounters are very realistic because they're based on real events. So kudos to the game makers for doing that. I've always believed that if you're going to develop something which is loosely based on reality, it's generally a good idea to reach out to the people who know about that reality. And there's nothing like servicemen and women who actually went from house to house in Fallujah, many of whom were wounded, many of whom died, to get a sense as to what it was like on the ground at the time. Much better than creating this out of thin air. The other point, though, I think that is worth making about this video game is the fact that, hate to say this, had the US not decided to invade Iraq in 2003 and overthrow Saddam Hussein based on very flimsy and, as it turned out, erroneous intelligence about his links to weapons of mass destruction, as well as links to Al-Qaeda, there would have been no Battle of Fallujah. There would have been no rise of Islamic State. There would have been no need to oust these pre-medieval, pre-antediluvian Islamist extremists from this Iraqi city, where they were terrorizing people on a daily basis. Now, of course, I'm not arguing for a return to the days of Saddam Hussein and his henchmen and the brutality with which he visited upon the Iraqi people. But the bottom line is that the invasion of Iraq to get rid of a dictator ended up creating a reality that was much worse in the long run. And that much worse was the creation of an Al-Qaeda affiliate, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which through a variety of transformations morphed into Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant. You can't get to ISIS without the American invasion of Iraq. It's as simple as that. So yes, I think the Americans had to do something about ISIS once it rose to power in 2014. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi proclaimed the caliphate, and they had this geographical territory. They were causing all kinds of problems for the locals. They were carrying out terrorist attacks. They were drawing in tens of thousands from Western countries around the world, including my own here in Canada, as well as other nations. They were wreaking havoc on Iraq, so you could not do anything about it. And yet when you look in the mirror, the very problem you created, you're now being asked to clean up. So what's the lesson in all of this? The lesson is stop calling this a war on terrorism. Stop seeing this primarily as a military reaction. The best antidote, if I use that term, to terrorism is counterterrorism. And that counterterrorism is best left in the hands of the women and men who work for security, intelligence, and law enforcement agencies. Not for the military, not for the Army, not for the Air Force. Yes, there is a role for them in that. You might want to read my fairly recent book, An End to the War on Terrorism, where I talk about where I think the various divisions of effort should be. But it shouldn't be primarily military, and that's what it became in the Battle for Fallujah. I hope people enjoy the game. Again, I'm not a gamer myself. I saw a little video on it. It looks interesting. It looks realistic for the reasons I mentioned. They actually talked to people who were there on the ground to see it. But when you're playing it, keep asking yourself, why was there a battle for Fallujah? Why was a decision made to oust Islamic State from an Iraqi city? Because we created it. We being the Americans and their allies. For those who are just joining us, I'm Phil Gurski, president of Borealis, former Canadian Security Intelligence Officer. If it's your first time, welcome. I'd love to see you guys subscribe and like it on YouTube. It'd be great. Take care, and thanks again for showing up.